he's got a work meeting. Okay, Lizzie, you are going to work on reading, maybe writing.
Writing. But yeah, just reading.
Okay.
Good. Yep.
John, you were going to work on getting some kind of an outline together, maybe for where the next section of the book is going.
No, I didn't, but I did get some more written. I got most of a chapter done.
Oh,
So
good.
not bad.
Oh, actually, there she is. Diana, you were going to take your comments we gave you and do another pass. Any luck?
I did some more work, and I actually even came up with another section that I hadn't thought of before.
Love that.
Yeah.
Good work. Signe, you were going to make a schedule for yourself for your writing, I think, or was it for something else?
Yeah, that's right. And that's a work in progress. Elizabeth and I are kind of balancing a number of things right now. Our mom needs a lot of care. So we're balancing, trying to figure out, you know, as we get added responsibilities in that arena, how to still honor our writing time and make time for that because it's so important. So yeah, that's a work in progress.
It's really hard. I really have great empathy for you in that process. Caregiving is no small task. Susan, you're going to stop researching and get back to your story. How'd it go?
Well, I went back to my story, started writing some more, and got another chapter or so done. And then realized I had to do a little more research, so I did that.
Oh dear.
Yeah, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. It's just I just for authenticity kind of purposes. But I did want to add to Signe and Elizabeth. I came down to Florida to take care of my two parents who were 96 and 94 at the time. And there was about 3 years of a lot of, yeah, it's a tough slog. It's a lot of balancing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. You know, my heart goes out to you guys.
Thanks, Susan. Mark, you were going to go back and reread several books for enjoyment.
Did I say that?
Yeah, what I got on the page.
I lied. I started a new hobby building model wooden ships.
How's it going?
And I was going to do that because I didn't want to write anymore. And what has happened, the pleasing texture of the wood has brought me back to writing.
What did?
Well, working with the wood, building this thing, it was so relaxing. I was able to totally detach from thinking about writing.
I love that.
And so now I'm back at writing my Viking era Irish monk novel, and so I will bore John with it ad nauseum in the coming months.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm glad you stuck with it. I like that though, that sometimes changing hobbies or crafts can open up some energy, mental energy. I wish I had skills like that, but I don't. All right, Sharon, you were inspired by the exercise to go back and make some edits and substitutions. We were doing verbs, I think was what you were jazzed about.
Right, and honestly, I did not do that, but I will because it's now part of my memory and learning. But I know at one point I was saying I wanted to start chapter 3 of this book, and but I have been a little stuck on how something can be realistic and happen, something that I want to happen. And so I don't know how many of you have ever been in an MRI before, but I had to go in one a couple of days, and it is so loud and annoying and horrible that you have to distract yourself and think about something. So I thought, okay, I am going to think about this problem that I have with chapter 3 and come up with something. And it gave my mind something to concentrate on. And by the time the MRI was done, I pretty much had resolved that problem.
It's the same. It's a different, same but different thing as Mark's, except yours is probably a lot less pleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you gotta fool that part of your brain that's trying to control everything and distract it. So
well, trying to be creative and solve a problem is a great way to distract your brain.
Yeah, good. All right. Rabia, you were working on plotting, balancing intuitive writing with an outline. How's it going?
I did a lot of intuitive and wrote in circles. So I can't say I got very far. I spent some time editing, and I am still stuck on the plot. But I have this class I'm taking is helping me get through that.
Good, good. Well, I'm glad you're still
I mean,
tackling it.
I'm taking this class and another class.
Yeah, I figured
Yeah.
somehow that's what you meant. Well, this class will just keep you entertained. All right. Mike, we missed you last week. Anything to report about your writing life? And just so you know, we can only see the top of your head.
Oh,
But it
okay.
does-
Now, am I muted?
No,
That's-
you're unmuted. I can hear you. I just can only see about this much of your head.
Yeah, that's because I didn't have a chance to do any writing. You know, I spent so much time trying to cover ground. I was down in the New Orleans area for a funeral, and so it just, I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a hard time. I'm sorry. to
you're
hear that.
depressed. I can't really write very much. Depressed. I can't. You know how it is. You know, just
I do. No, and please remember when we check in, there's no pressure to have written. It's really just for you to hold yourself accountable to your goals. And I always tell people, set simpler goals. Make your goals be like, I'm just gonna think about my writing this week. If you're finding that writing goals are not as effective. Okay. All right. Well, really good to see everybody. And what we're going to do today is talk about imagery and how images, not only do they build tension, but they create texture and subtext and are a great way to demonstrate emotion and character details. And a lot of you naturally write them, but you might not even be aware you're writing them. And once you become aware of them, they are just a really wonderful tool. And I think they really make writing stand out, especially if you've got a strong story and strong characters, but maybe there's a little something missing or you feel like it's not there yet. Images might be the thing you just need to start working on. So I think, Mark, you might have seen this one before, so sorry about that.
I've got a bad memory.
That's great for me. So an image is, in a nutshell, anything that can be seen or felt. So visual imagery or sensory imagery. So anything you can describe visually and anything that someone can feel through any of the senses, and we will talk about this very specifically. Another way to think of it is as a stylized description selected to evoke emotional, symbolic, or thematic meaning. It can also be used to create ambiance, tone, mood, foreshadowing. And of course, most important to me is it's a way to do that old trope, to show rather than tell. And I think you will find once you start becoming aware of what images are, you will notice them in writing. That, like, if you're reading something, whether it's in class or for your own pleasure, they start to leap out at you. And there are certain ones that kind of take your breath. Sometimes they're almost like poetry. Now, not everybody writes that way, but you don't have to write poetically to write a good image. I always like to start with this image from the French surrealist Magritte, because this is a pipe, right? This is a painting of a pipe, but what the words say is that this is not a pipe. So I love that, because to me, he's tapping into the idea of a symbol, right? So it's not a pipe, it's a symbol of something. It's an image of a pipe. And the image stands for something, represents something. There's a lot of theories on what it means, the denouncement of modern advertising. It may just be his, toying with reality because he was a surrealist. Some people might say he was phallic object obsessed, who knows? But what he understood, and what many artists understand, is that images have power and layers of meaning. They're never just one thing. You can create that same kind of power and meaning with images in words. What I love about images as well is that they often speak to the unconscious mind, meaning it's less intellectual and it's more like gut or heart. And in that way, they are very much sometimes similar to poetry, because they, when you read a poem, maybe some of you are reading them for the literal meaning. For me, I tend to read them and just kind of like let it absorb and like take it in. And it might even take me a few reads for that meaning to sink in, Very commonly, images come in the form of similes. So that's where we use the comparative words like or as. Here's example. I'm going to be reading you lots of examples. The thrill wore off fast, like the rush of a homemade drug. The way the cheap stuff hits you hard, but leaves you hungry in an instant. I love that. So that's from An American Marriage. images can also be metaphors, you know, which is where you're sort of describing something you're comparing something without, like, or as something that can't necessarily be that thing. One of my favorites is the title of a book, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. That's a great metaphor. This is from a short story from one of my absolute favorite short story writers, Lori Moore, in her book, Self-Help. And the character has a terminal cancer. And as she reveals it to people in her life, she gets these responses. So here are some great metaphors. I am something incorrect. A hair in the cottage cheese, something uncouth, a fart in an elevator. So you can, what I love about this is she could have said, people respond strangely to me. They give me weird reactions. They, you know, treat me funny. But instead, she uses images and metaphor to convey meaning, which I think is more effective. We can use images to describe characters or the way in which characters interact with one another. In this example, this is an example from a book I just love so much called Swamplandia. And I'll read it to you and then I'll ask you a couple questions about it. So, the Birdman's eyes were like new lamps for the old performance. He kept smiling and smiling at me. And when his gaze rolled over my skinny legs, the pins of my knees became twin suns. So how would you describe the level of attention that this Birdman is giving this person with the skinny legs? Would you say it's mild attention, it's intense, it's a lot, it's little?
A lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
But what tells you that? What metaphor is working here, or simile that is, yeah, Susan?
For me, it's the pins of my knees became twin suns. You know, that the gaze was so intense that she felt like the heat of the sun on her.
Yes, yes. Anyone else?
Yeah, they also say his eyes were like new lamps for the old performance. That's strong.
What does that conjure? What kind of light does that conjure? Dark light? Bright light?
Bright light.
Okay, so, and you see how it hits us all, like without even consciously thinking, bright light, lamps, it all gets conjured. We get it. We feel the heat. We feel the brightness. Now, if I tell you that this is an older man and a teen girl, but it takes on kind of a different tone, doesn't it? Yeah, so this guy is giving a young teen this attention that, of course, she likes it. She's a teenager. Teenagers love attention. She doesn't quite yet understand that his intention might be nefarious, right? So anyways, really powerful. I don't expect anyone to write like this or to write in the same voice like this, but I do think it's fun to really kind of call out strong images so that we can start to write even simple ones. You can also have imagery in the form of dialogue. So characters can speak poetically, can speak imagistically, or in idioms. A lot of characters speak in idioms, which are essentially images. This one is from a book called My Dark Vanessa. And this is a similar theme. It's basically a predatory teacher who seduces his student over time. And so what he does is he uses this language with her that makes her, that's trying to make her, it's grooming her, right? He's making her seem special and that they have something in common. So he says, when we're together, he says, it feels as though the dark things inside me rise to the surface and brush against the dark things inside you. Again, any grown man saying that to any grown woman that's going to get punched in the nose, but a teen girl is going to be like, oh, he's so poetic, right? So anyways, but it's the metaphors here. Like he could have said, you know, we both have a morbid sensibility or something, but it's the way he phrases it. These images, they tell you something about his character, and they are just kind of compelling, even though they're gross, it's compelling. Couple of other ways to consider character images. So you can reveal traits about characters in an imagistic way so that it's not just, she was tall, he was large, you know. So this is from the perspective of a character describing his girlfriend as she's getting pulled into this sort of almost like a terrorist group. It's hard to explain. I'm trying to imagine it. Phoebe sitting with the group again, legs pulled in, posture like a ball, a full-bodied fist. So you can really see that, right? Just really held closely together, a full-bodied fist. I love that so much. And this one is a little bit less, well, there's one image in it, but the rest of it's pretty straightforward. Paul's disease is different because you can see it, an archipelago of scabs on a scalp. caked makeup over sores across the chin, blanched spots on tan calves. I love that archipelago of scabs on a scalp. Just, you know, subtle phrasing that makes your brain kind of go, oh, interesting. I can almost see that. So now I want to move into, as we talk a little bit more about character images, I want to move into emotional imagery, because this is an area I see people struggle with a lot, and it's especially in first drafts, but sometimes it just takes time to get this down. So the least effective way to evoke or to demonstrate emotions in a character is to just tell it. He was angry, or what I see more often, she felt sad, she felt this, she felt that, right? There's nothing wrong with that statement, but as a reader, I want to have a visceral experience of that emotion, right? So what you can do sometimes is you can use an image to convey it instead. Now, I don't know that this is the best image, but we'll play a little bit more with sensory images in a bit. The sun is up, depressing me like the mindless smile of a cheerleader. I love that one. Right now, of course, depending on who you are, if you're actually a cheerleader, that image might not work for you. But for someone who's jaded or has some cynicism about cheerleaders, it works, and it's hilarious to me. So now I want us to walk deeper into sensory imagery, and there's several ways to do this. The body, as I say here, is a powerful locus of emotion, and I would say I'm not going to say that emotion is universal, because I know that there are people who have a vast variety of experiences, but I do think that largely characters experience emotion first in the body, and then their brains put a name to it. So it's like we have a feeling, our hearts pound, we get a weird twisting sensation in our guts, our throat feels thick, choked. All of those things happen first, and then we have a thought. Now someone will tell me, no, I'm the other way around. The thought comes first. But anyways, so this is just a tool to work with. But I like to do this one together kind of out loud as a group. So let's take an emotion. Somebody pick an emotion and say it out loud.
Grief.
Okay, so we'll go with grief. And you'll just use yourself as the character in this exercise. So tell me, and you can speak out loud, where do you feel in your body grief? And we'll stop share for a second. Where, just point, or you can tell me. Like when you're feeling grief, where does it, so you've got some chest, some heart. Where else do people feel it? Throat. I get stomachy feelings, right? Like kind of a hollow gut feeling. Anywhere else? Maybe anyone have a strange place that grief resides? I don't know. Maybe your toes feel cold. So, okay. So grief, let's go with chest and throat. Now, what kind of a sensation is grief in your chest? If you were to describe the physical sensation of it, is it for instance, is it a bouncing lightness?
Tight
No,
burning.
it's almost like a compression.
Okay, so you've got a compression. Mark has a tight burning. I feel like we need to call a doctor now. No, just kidding. Diana, what did you say?
I said I have an ache.
You have an ache where in your chest?
Mm-hmm.
And does it? Yeah. Okay. And yeah, Susan.
A choking numbness.
You get a choking numbness. Oh, that's interesting, because choking and numbness almost seem like opposite feelings, but it's like choked by the numbness or something.
Yeah.
I could see how you could get a dry mouth too, as well as
yes,
feelings of closure, inability to swallow.
Yes.
And your eyes well up.
Yes, right. So what we have here already, you've got the where of the sensation. It is in the chest, and then it feels like. Okay, so let's try to just throw out a couple of these. In fact, let's just write them. I want you guys to write these. I want you to take two emotions. We have grief, and then pick one of your own. Joy, humiliation, anger. And so what you're going to do is you're going to make a simile, right? So grief in his chest was like blocks of ice. Anger, or you can write it in any other way, like his limbs electrified with anger, like blah, blah, blah. So just you've got this template up here. Try to see if you can put the sensation in a particular part of the body, and then give us an image, compare it to something. What is it like? Okay, I'll give us a few minutes for it. If you only get one, that's fine. You don't have to do two. right, wrap up your sentence, your image. All right, does anyone want to share? Please. Doesn't have to be good. All right, yeah, John. I muted you all, sorry. I do that when you're writing.
Who's going first?
John is, he's just unmuting himself.
Okay. Yeah, I just need to ask a question. But how do you, I really can't localize any of the feelings like in me. This is, it's different. I can see them in other people.
You don't have to
But that's a
use your own
surface sort of thing.
experience though. You could take other people's like description of, okay, it's in the chest and it feels like a compression, and you could write one like that. So like he, someone speaks some words, they feel grief, and then the character's chest compressed with the weight of the words or something.
Yeah, it was just kind of interesting to think, what I see or what I feel when like I feel grief, which is like I witnessed like a person drowning.
Beautiful.
That's not anything that I would feel. That's something that I can witness on somebody else.
So we're going to get to that too, because you don't always have to use the body as the locus of an image, but it is a useful way. But you can also use visual imagery or anything else that can be described. So you could say, he felt like a man drowning or something like that. And it will still work.
All right, I got two.
All right.
You
I don't
guys
know, John, were you done? I want to make sure John's done before.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I thought about a lot of things, but they didn't fit into that category.
That's okay. So I appreciate you giving it a try. Yeah. All right, Mark.
I've talked to Mike so much. John so much. I know when he's done.
All right.
Okay, here is. You guys got to guess which ones these are.
Yeah, actually, I'd like us to do that. So.
When I heard the news, my mind caught fire, raged from stem to stern, soon resolving to a determination to fix this abomination of man. Number two. This might be overwritten. The vice tightened, a crushing as if between two millstones.
I mean, so what do we think? First one, I would say like righteous anger or something.
Yep.
All right. And the second one, I mean, that could be a lot of things. It could be grief. It could be pressure. Yeah, good. I like them. Susan, I saw you had your hand up, and then Mike after that. Oh, remember, I muted you.
Okay. It fell on her heart, shattering it into shards and onto the floor of her belly.
Nice. I would say surprise, grief, some kind of pain. There was some pain involved in the sharp shattering.
Emotional betrayal.
Betrayal, nice. I like it. Now, of course, keep in mind there'll be context. You're not just going to write images at random and people have to guess, right? So, Mike, do you have one?
Okay, yeah, I used a sorrow. So the warm, flooding wetness in his eyes stopped after passing through an immense fog of sorrow.
Ooh, I like that, immense fog. Nice. And yeah, so you can use the weather, you can use the natural world to compare things to one another. Anyone else want to share? Diana?
Her grief was like a chest compression delivered by a 250-pound bodybuilder, though it would never revive her.
Oh, wow. I like that a lot. Nice.
And then I had, no, thank you. And then I had her anger was like a force rising through her body, a wild animal with a mind of its own that wouldn't be easily contained.
Nice. Very nice.
That was good.
Good work. Anyone else? Rabia? Yay, nay? You can pass if you want. No, you just muted yourself. You were unmuted.
Okay. Well, I probably should pass.
No.
But I'll read this one. She held back the anger in her throat that was like churning cement, readying to pour over him.
Ooh, I like that one. I like that one. It took me somewhere different. I
What
like
you
that a
do.
lot. Good work. Sharon, do you have one? Oh, sorry, you're still muted. It's just inevitable these days.
So her anger exploded from her spleen like a rocket ship into every extremity, causing her arms to flail and her feet to stomp and her teeth to bare.
Nice.
Grief spread from his heart through his body like a pool of blood spreads across the floor when a person is shot.
Ooh, nice and grim. I like it. Good work. Signy, do you have one you want to share?
Well, I can identify with John on this. Like sometimes with questions like this, I don't know if it's because I'm autistic, but I'll just draw a complete blank and then have to really think about it. So I guess one I thought of was anxiety buzzed in her chest like a hive full of angry bees.
Exactly.
Questions like this give me anxiety. And
I'm sorry.
Right now when Jordan wants me to do this thing on the fly, and that's how I came up with it. So.
Well,
How
please
does that
keep in
anxiety
mind.
feel?
Yeah, well, she just
Like
described it.
Electrified bees in my chest.
Oh, I like that even better. Electrified bees.
Yeah.
I know it does force us to go, like, I actually draw a blank too sometimes when I do these, but you all always surprise me with how much great stuff comes out. But remember, you can pass if it doesn't work for you. No pressure is just because I call on you, you don't have to answer. Please know that I'm gentle in this class. Lizzie?
I would like to share something very personal that I've never shared with more than 2 people.
All right.
I was 22 years old. I was in the Navy. My ship had been on deployment for 8 months, for a 9-month deployment. I got a letter from my wife saying she was leaving, wanting a divorce. 22-year-old guy, and with a child, with a son.
Be depressing. Yeah.
I got to fly home, and for hours, it's a long flight from Japan to LA. For hours, I had that grief, but what I'm going to say is the emotions I went through over all that time, they were combinations, and they would they would many times change places. So that sort of thing can consume an extended amount of time, evolve and devolve repeatedly with no resolution. So just throwing that out.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I'm sorry that you went through that.
Yeah, not me. Not now.
Well, yeah, many years behind you. I was going to say in the character workshop that I teach, which will be in a few months, we talk about sort of levels of emotion and how there's rarely ever just a single emotion present in any given scene. And there's actually usually many. So just a little preview of something down the road. But yeah, that's a really good point. Let's see, who have I missed here? Lizzie and then Mike, right? Lizzie, do you want to share anything?
Absolutely nothing. I can't, I think it's like the pressure of, and I never can do this, like, I've taken some poetry classes and other stuff too. So I can do, like in 4 stanzas, kind of like this extended, like the metaphors and stuff. But when it comes to like 2 lines, I freak. I think I've been doing this since like 1st grade.
Is it the in-person part though? Like, would you be able to do it with yourself alone on the page? Or is it the fact that we're in person? You know what I mean? The fact that we're asking you to do it right now.
Yeah, because I am not the quickest. Like I am, you know what I mean? Like,
I do. I understand.
Like, and I'm like, oh, I got that like 20 minutes later. But I know when I write, I think it's just
because
I tend to like really go into the image.
Yes, and that's fine.
All of that, but when it's like the 2 lines, I'm like tearing the head.
No, all I really want is for you guys to be able to gain this skill so that when you go to your writing, even if it takes you 3 hours to write an image, I don't care, that you have it in the back of your mind as a tool, particularly wherever you have the word felt, feel, feeling, because what I want you to do is get out of, not you, but anyone, to get out of the habit that many of us have of telling an emotion and then assuming the reader's going to know what that feels like. Because, and of course you can't exactly make anyone feel anything, but the more information you give about an emotion, the more access the reader has to it. And I know we're all different. Some of us might read the same image and not get the same emotion out of it, but you get an experience of some kind. Whereas if you're just like, she was mad, you're like, okay, well, I have to take your word for it that she was mad because I don't see any evidence of it. Or likewise, you can use one of your images, I think it was Sharon's, you were like, you described behavior, like she flailed her limbs, blah, blah. It's another way to express emotions through behavior, how people act and what they say. So it's not, but all I'm trying to do today is just like plant this little idea in the back of your head so that when you go to your writing and you spend time with it, you're like, oh, there's felt again. Can I possibly make this into an image, a sensory image instead? Or would an image here be more effective than me just telling the reader that she had a sad childhood? Like, so. Okay, Mike, I don't think I got to you. So do you have one?
Like you were saying, and like Mark was saying, sometimes, your emotions just get all mixed up. It's hard to identify. That happens to me whenever I do something completely stupid and I realize I've done it, and I've done that more than once in my life, and so, yeah. And you get it's sort of a mixed up feeling of what? Shame, anger at yourself, anger.
Well, and think about what that felt like. I'm sure, Mark, if you were to relive some of those hours, you could recreate the imagery of what that roller coaster of emotions is like. So that's all we're really doing today. But good work, everyone. And for those of you who felt pressured, I'm sorry. I hate that I made you feel that way. That's not my intention, but I understand. So I'm going to go through a few more. I think that by the end of this, I think you'll have a pretty good idea of what images look like. Here are two also that convey emotion, but they convey it indirectly. So I can't necessarily put a name to this emotion, but you get a sense of, or I should say it conveys an experience the character is having. So in the first one, something bad has happened to this character named Finch, and the character named Alice is watching, looking on as it happens. Time slowed. Finch was a spilled cup just before it hit the ground. A precious something dropped into the dark beneath a subway grate. So she could have said many things. The birds are competing for the attention here outside my window. Stop it. She could have said, he was attacked in an alley. He was slashed with a knife. He was dying. There's anything she could have said, but she, for one thing, by being imagistic, you kind of don't quite know what's happening, which is a little bit attention building. It keeps the mystery alive. But you do pretty much know what's happening because, she's talking about things being lost, things being spilled, kind of obvious. And then in another situation, trying to describe almost having, maybe like a dissociated feeling or feeling numb or alone. She says, I'd felt for months as though I lived pushed up against glass walls. I couldn't find a way in. Out on the sidewalk alone, I watched the crowds reveling inside. So this is sort of describing a loneliness, a feeling outside or other. I think that's a really beautiful image. And then I'm going to talk a little more specifically about sensory imagery, not necessarily in the landscape of the body, but using the senses to convey information in an imagistic way. I personally am a big fan of embodied and body-centric imagery because we live in bodies and they inform our experience of the world, even though we think a lot of it is happening in our brains. I mean, it is happening in our brains or our minds. So much is happening. Think about like the intuitive level of behavior where, I don't know if you've ever been in like a dangerous situation where it's like you almost acted before your mind caught up, like you acted on instinct, like you grabbed a child and pulled them out of the way of a car, or you jumped out of the way yourself, or, just where you're already at, your body is almost acting before your mind can catch up. So we really are embodied creatures. So a few more sensory imagery type images. We were filled with the water of the drowned, cold and black, airless water that lapped against the seal of our tongues or leaked slowly from the corners of our eyes. John, this makes me think of you. What emotions does this conjure for anyone? Is this a happy?
Sadness, intense sadness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sad. Yeah. I would say.
Depression, yeah.
Depression, sorrow, grief, regret, even, who knows, but
I don't like that personally. I don't know. There's something about that that just gives me the creeps.
Well, that's good.
yay. So she did her job, right? I know. So but that's a great point, that when an image is really working is you feel it and you don't necessarily like what you're feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like sometimes I'm often complimenting my editing clients for like when they do really good gory imagery, like someone's murdered in a bloody way. I'm like, great work, because even though it's horrifying, I could see it. It was so, visceral, or I could feel the emotion. So anyways, you can also use sensory imagery to convey things about characters, both visually and personality wise. I love this from Lydia Yuknevich's The Book of Joan. Her face is a new world. Under her fingertips, her burned chin sits like a guilty, poreless butte, a stubborn reminder. So I had to ask, this quote gives itself away. I'd asked, what happens to this character? But I forgot it says burned right in the middle. I like, though, that she could have said she was disfigured, she had scars, but instead the way she describes the face also describes this character's personality, which, if you haven't read this book, it's quite a book.
I
Drawing.
like the fact that she's hiding.
Yeah.
It seems like she's hiding it.
Yeah. Huh. Under her.
Okay, so Jordan, is that third person when she's describing her face?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because
I'm trying to remember if this is one character describing another character. I think it is.
Because if you're outside looking in, describing somebody, isn't that omniscient, even though you're using the word her? It's
No,
not
because
just-
let's say it's the character is me and I'm describing you, but we're in my perspective. So we're inside my head and I'm describing Sharon's face as a new world under her fingertips. So I'm describing you. We're in the third person. If it's not clear who the narrator is and that information's being delivered to us outside of a character's head, or we're understanding it somehow is supposed to be the character herself talking about herself, then it's omniscient.
So that was some other character describing.
It's another character. So it's character A describing character B.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, but that would be without that definition. It does seem omniscient. But yes, otherwise it could seem omniscient. Her face is a new world under her fingertips. Absolutely. So you're right. Your instinct is good.
Okay.
So let's draw on a few other sensory images. Sight is, of course, the most predominant sense you'll probably use because we're often trying to set the scene and show people doing things. So when you use visual imagery to describe things, it's really more about sort of how you describe it. Not necessarily that you use similes or metaphors, but sometimes you might. So for instance, from this is a friend of mine's book of essays, The Oasis this time. It's all about water. She used to be a river guide. And I just love the kind of, you can see what she's describing. It really calls it to mind. So, but she's not using any fancy terms. So river canyons, especially the Grand Canyon, are places of secrets too, right there, places of secrets. I love that. Hidden green grottos, never dreamed of by the sun-dazed visitor who spends the obligatory 10 minutes at the South Run. So we have places of secrets, hidden green grottos, and sun-dazed visitors. They're all images. They're not fancy, they're not complicated, but they're pretty, they're interesting. They conjure something in our mind. Yeah, I'm not going to read that one because I think you can also use like the weather or the setting to reflect a character's mood. You see that a lot. The trees too leaned heavily beneath the wind as though they carried a burden as heavy as her own, right? You can sort of help us reflect on a character's mood through imagery, through what can be seen. Sound, I don't think, oh, I do have one in the next slide. Think of all the many forms of sound that enter a character's consciousness and the meanings that they hold, and think of how you might be able to pull those into images. Again, make a simile out of it. For instance, the sound of a baby crying to a mother might be jarring like a train whistle coming through, but to a woman who desperately wants a baby, it could be the sweetest sound like a blah, blah, you know. So do you see what I'm saying? Depending on what the character feels about what they're hearing or seeing or smelling, the image can change and be something different. But think about the ways that sound impacts your characters. Here's one describing the sound of a voice. His voice was cloves and nightingales. It took us to spice markets in the celebs. We drifted with him on a houseboat beyond the coral sea. We were like cobras following a reed flute. I love that. His voice was cloves and nightingales. And then we were like cobras following a reed flute. So again, very simple. None of this is beyond anyone's ability to write. It's just learning to think in images is what takes some time. Scent is another one. I loved this book, The Scent Keeper by Erica Baumeister. I loved it because it's full of images about scent. And there's so many of them that I like wanted to keep writing them over and over again. And scent for me is a very powerful, like it triggers memory. I think it's something we don't use enough in our fiction. We kind of forget to bring it in. For instance, I put some examples. There's certain scents that drop me right back into time. Like there's a floor wax that my grandmother used in her New York apartment, or the building used. I've only smelled it a few other places in existence. And it's like a slap in the face. I'm right back there. And then my dad used to take me to this pool, and there were jasmine flowers that grew outside. So when I smell jasmine, I actually smell chlorine, even though it's not there, because they're paired in my mind. And then of course, memories arise. So I love this one. The scent was gorgeous, generous, set off by a series of synthetic, surreal scents, bright as searchlights, precise as expertly manicured fingernails tapping against a table. It's almost like synesthetic, like she's, you know what I mean? I don't know if I can explain that better, but so she's smelling something that is like, it's bright. I get that. For me, I can totally smell a bright smell. And precise as expertly manicured fingernails. To me, that's like a perfume someone usually wears when I used to go to the movies. That lady would always sit ahead of me with her perfume on. She had this perfume on, bright and precise. It was like, woo, you know, poked me in the nostrils. I just really love that though. So she's describing something. It's like, you know, I know, it's wonderful. Touch, of course, is important, and how characters exhibit touch, react to touch each other, the way that they allow touch can be used imagistically to convey information. These are, I made these up a long time ago. They're not very good, but they give you an example. She touched him as though he were something very new or very old, as though he needed extreme care, lest he break or bend or cry. His touch made her shudder, as though his fingers had turned to thick, dragging slugs. So, you know, you can communicate, think about images as communicating information in a way that is a little more, it's giving more information than just how you might say it plainly. And it's doing it in a way that lets the reader have more access to the emotion. A couple more. Taste. I think I made up this one too. They're never very good because I'm not good on, see, I'm not good under pressure either. But taste is it's also very powerfully linked to memory and emotion. So you know, think about like if your character, here I say your character might be eating chicken soup that conjures the memory of a comforting caregiver or the loss of one. Taste can be pleasurable or revolting. It can reflect a person's mood. You know how if you are in the state of grief, sometimes your appetite goes away and food tastes dull. Or if you're excited or happy, suddenly everything tastes good. So, and I also find in general that people often forget to eat in their books or in their stories. I don't mean that you need big scenes full of, you know, dinners and such, but I do like, you know, as a simulation of reality, sometimes it's good to get them to eat. I'm not going to read my stupid one.
It just occurred to me that when we eat, many times we'll roll the food, play with the food with our tongue, chew it differently for different types of food, and enjoy it in an organic way other than just eat, chew,
other than
swallow.
just, yeah, people savor food. Yeah. In fact, it's funny because a lot of times in books I see people will be drinking alcohol and I'm like, I'm a savorer. I like a glass of wine to savor it. I like the flavor, but it's like he threw back his glass of wine. I'm like, I don't buy that. That's not how people drink wine unless they're trying to get drunk, which is a different story. Setting, which is important to build that world around your character, can be done with very small image touches rather than having to go into the like long-winded descriptions of setting. So some images that conjure something like for this one, I stared past him into the lab where silver faucets curved like swans' necks glinted in the dim light. We don't need to see that entire lab, but that's enough for me to, I'm right back in like a science classroom as a high schooler. For me, that's where I go. You know, you could use a few more details, but I love how simple that is. This one was really interesting to me. The way that he imagines the history of this area. So the Edwards Quadrangle had been built on top of an old burial site. Beneath the lawn, the earth would be latticed with bones. I love that.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, this one, I love this one, not because I'm morbid, but because something similar happened. You know, I'm a retired school teacher, you know, I'll make this quick. I've done kindergarten through 12th grade. I move around a lot. I did. But anyway, when I was doing preschool, the preschool was built next to a cemetery. And the property had been donated from the cemetery thing. But it was an old cemetery, went back to the 1700s. What they didn't know was that there were graves that they'd forgotten about on the preschool side. And the children started bringing us these bones they were digging up, you know, and it was, at first they just thought, you know, I had dog bones or something, but then they finally realized, hey, you know,
yeah,
that's in the sandbox.
That's creepy and hilarious and should go into a
Yeah.
story somewhere. All right.
It was. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So what I want you to take away is that, you know, images are like either like little gems, meaning they kind of call beautiful attention to something, they highlight, they illuminate, or like little bombs. So sometimes you use an image and it kind of has a powerful impact. It makes us feel something, like that Louise Erdrich quote where Sharon was like, ooh, I don't like that. Yeah, sometimes it makes you feel something, and it can be both positive or negative. But when they're working, you feel things and you're struck. For me, they strike me and they linger in my mind, even if I don't specifically remember them. Like I'm very aware of them on the page, and they feel good to my subconscious mind. I'm going to skip this one just because I've already sort of said that. Images are also useful for evoking thematic significance in your story. If you want to point to the theme without being overkill or overhanded, you can use imagery to create a theme. I'm just looking this out here. So yeah, okay. So does somebody have like a concrete theme for their story that you could talk about? Like it's about survival. It's about learning to love oneself. It's about forgiveness. Anybody? John, I feel like your story is very thematic. How would you sum up your theme? And you're muted, just FYI. You're still muted, friend.
I like you call me friend when we do that. It's really just about finding out who you are. So discovering yourself.
Yeah, maybe let's call that authenticity, just for lack of a better word.
Authenticity. That's
okay, so
good.
What might be some images that come to mind when we think of authenticity? I know I'm putting you all back on the spot, which you all hate. Let me think. What do I think of when I think of authenticity? I think of
quality.
It
comes to mind. Authenticity, say of an antique or something you're holding.
So maybe there's maybe there is a repeating theme about quality, like high quality objects make an appearance, or there's like if your story is about class issues, maybe there's always like Susan, I feel like there's a little bit of that in your story. Maybe there's an emphasis on images related to money and success and buying things and shopping. And so, the status symbol, status is what I'm thinking of, like, BMWs versus, broken down blah, blah, blahs.
Or occurrences of broken things.
How about mirrors?
Mirrors. Ooh, I like that. Yes, I love that as authenticity. Yeah. So like seeing oneself in a mirror. I like that a lot, actually. Okay, so that's not, again, these are hard to do off the top of your head, but it's fun to think about. If you know your book's themes, to ask yourself what might be, and this could be an exercise you do kind of almost meditatively. You spend some time, you sit down, you write. What could be, make a list of images that could relate to the theme of your story. And then ask yourself, okay, if you can come up with those images, you might be able to plant them throughout the story in places. Maybe it's a painting that hangs behind someone's head in a room. Maybe it's even a spoken word of dialogue. Maybe it's an object that, you know, represents what you're talking about. Maybe it's comparing something, like I'm reading a book right now that has to do with like climate change and endangered species. So there's a lot of images around nature in disrepair, things being like icebergs melting and dry grass and dead animals and things like that. That sounds morbid, but it's actually a quite beautiful book. There's also a lot of ship imagery because they're on a ship. So she uses these metaphors to convey the larger thing. Now I realize this is like a sort of master level of writing, but it is powerful. And I recommend that you, one thing I want to say, like, for instance, I also notice at the end of a lot of books I've read, not a lot, but at least several, the color either yellow or gold often comes in to represent hope or a new beginning, like something positive. I've seen that a number of times. So you might have a motif of some kind, like they do in the movies, right? A recurring image that keeps repeating, that shows you, that tells you something subconsciously or subtly that the reader might pick up on without really being aware of it. So it's just something to think about. And images can also foreshadow plot elements, kind of give us a sense of something that's to come without telling us directly. And I really think that's great, especially if you're relying on tropes where it was like, what he didn't know was that the bad guy lurked around the corner. You know, if you're relying on omniscient revelations like that, you might want to try some imagistic foreshadowing. I'm skipping a few because I feel like it's repetitive. And yeah, so in summary, images, they speak to the subconscious more than the literal mind or the emotional self. They help you to show, not tell. They evoke character, emotion, and experience, which I think is the most important, as well as creating that tone and ambiance. They also just add style, texture, and depth to your writing, and can suggest thematic elements and foreshadow plot elements. So that's the gist. Does anyone have any questions about that? Yes, no? Okay. Was that a finger?
I can't
This
think.
is,
Wait, all right.
go ahead.
Go.
Trevor.
That was really interesting. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm still
This is-
chewing on it.
Yeah. It's going to take a while. I mean, and you'll get the slides. So go, feel free to look back through them. But I would really encourage you in whatever you read next to look for the images. And whether you have some sticky notes you can put in there or you highlight things in the next few things you read, and see what kinds of images different writers use. And if you notice anything about them, are there themes? Is there any rhyme or reason to their imagery? Some writers do it organically. Some writers do it very intentionally, strategically, and put them in, and others just, they come out of them naturally. I'm a combination of both. Sometimes they come naturally, and then I have to go back through and kind of really open up the writing later. All right, Mark, you had a question?
Not a question. I was going to say, all your lessons are very good, but this one is something I'm really going to have to go back and look at 3 or 4 times because it's something I need to do better.
Yeah, but I would say you have a lot of imagery in your writing, but it's fun to be conscious about it.
Yellow means sick.
Right. Well, you really have a motif in your story. All right, let's take our 5-minute break, and then we will come back and we'll talk about Sharon's piece. So 5:08, we will reconvene.
Well,
is that storm on your doorstep yet?
No, I've got nice, pleasant weather. Not one leaf is stirring. The sun's going down on the proper time. It's mild and mellow outside.
About 20 minutes ago, it really rolled through here.
Well, I live what I call under the dome up on Sand Mountain. I can watch the weather, especially tornadic weather.
Oh, yeah, that's wonderful stuff.
Comes from southeast to southwest to northeast. Let me say, yeah. Let me do it this way for you. From southeast, southwest to northeast. and the worst of it'll be coming right towards where I live, and it will spread part and go around and come back. I think it's the geography of the mountain, that sort of thing. But I call it living under the dome. Everybody gets hit hard. We don't. We get some frog stranglers, but now watch. I'll get a tornado ripped down my house tonight.
Which usually not too bad here. We had one tornado come and pitch a couple of trees over across our fence. We had the big one come by, the EF5. It roared by about a mile west of here, took out all kinds of things. It just left the ground like, you know, it'd been plowed. It's amazing.
Mike, what part of Alabama do you live in?
We live in northern Alabama. I live near Huntsville.
Well,
Rocket City, USA.
Rocket City? Yeah.
Well, that's Huntsville's where the Marshall Space Flight Center is, where they build all the rockets and that sort of thing.
I had no idea. Yeah.
It's quite a cosmopolitan place. It used to be known as the watercress capital of the world before the Redstone Arsenal moved in. Then the Marshall Space Flight Center had all the Nazis gather there.
Yeah, you know, when I moved up just out. There were cornfields and cotton fields all around where I live. That's all changed now.
Huntsville's a very cosmopolitan place, Mike. It's not your atypical southern city. It grew up quickly, and it grew up by people coming from all walks of life and regions of the United States. When I moved here in the 6th grade, there were only 2 kids in my class that were born in Alabama. Most of our teachers in high school were wives of engineers. So it was a different place growing up. A lot of melding, a lot of, I wouldn't say melting pot, but it was like everyone was equal. I think that was partially because of the excitement of the space program, and that everybody had a part in it. Everybody had a stake in it, whether you were a contractor or you had work that supported a contractor or supported the community. There was no stagnation. It was always a sense of moving forward, of bright shiny new pennies kind of thing, which was kind of nice.
I knew a lot of the old timers who were, you know, it started back in the 50s, and you know they were really excited and proud, you know, of what they've been doing. And I think it must have been a really great time to be here.
Well, you know,
for a kid of the 60s. Go ahead, John. Go ahead, Mike.
The South is changing. I mean, my mom used to tell me about literally studying with the kerosene lanterns, and then that was her generation. And then, like you said, now we've got spaceships being designed down there. You know, it is changing, the whole South. Even the ethnicity is changing. You know, you've got.
Well, I just had a new neighbor move in to a house next door that was built by a couple from Florida who had been originally from New Jersey. They moved up here for quality of life issues with kids. And when the kids left, they decided to sell their house and move back to Florida. And the people who bought it are from Connecticut. We're getting a lot of people discovering rural North Alabama and enjoying the perks here. I hope the word doesn't spread too rapidly. John, did you see my Facebook post about stepping outside and hearing the highway roar?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you haven't?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Okay.
I saw that. Yeah, I did.
I stepped outside.
Was that a picture of your creek?
Nah, it's close.
I didn't think so. That looked like one I've seen up in North Georgia.
It looks very much like, if I took a picture of that stream that goes down to the creek. The creek is wide. The creek is about 40 feet wide, and tumbles over rocks, trees overarching. It's great, and a wooden bridge on a county road. But no, most of the noise was coming from that stream that rushes down to the creek. which is about, let's see, about 80 feet below my land, and the creek splits
Wow.
my property.
That's a good drop.
It is.
Good drop.
Let me tell you, it's not someplace you want to walk up and down, but I should. I should get out there and walk up and down that creek. People stop on the bridge and just, people who aren't local, if they have come across, they'll stop and just look up and down that creek both directions and just kind of, oh, it's kind of nice.
All right,
I've got,
I'm back. Um, okay.
I'm having a little late supper. Sorry.
Fine, it's 3 hours later your time. I would
Yeah.
be long past dinner if it was 8 o'clock.
Well,
my wife's bringing me chicken.
oh,
What's man?
I am.
Nobody's getting any food tonight. I got my second shot today, and so I told them in case I feel bad, I'm not cooking.
oh, right.
So far, I'm okay, but that'll probably hit tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm actually in the middle of cooking a chicken gumbo. I got inspired.
Hmm,
Being back home for a while. Yeah.
I bet. All right. We are going to start with the heat, what we loved, what worked for us, and then talk about what we felt she could do more of or change. So who would like to start talking about Sharon's piece? And a reminder that I will set a timer. When you hear it go off, you can finish your thought. You don't have to shut your mouth immediately, but do try to wrap it up. Who's feeling it? Who's feeling bold? Susan.
Okay. Okay, so the heat for me, the story was amazing. You know, will she ever find her parents? Are they alive or dead? You know, will the woman keep her from them, you know, for a malevolent reason? I thought the tension of the scene when she was swept away from her mother into the jungles, you know, really kept me going and only slowed me in just a couple of parts. Having her recognize the safe haven of that boat really was a great way to show me how intelligent and quick on her feet she was, even in a time like that, where she could actually do that. And, you know, the drawing when gesturing didn't work right away, you know, jumping onto the bus, seeing the opportunity of that, all gave me a sense of her intelligence and all that, which is one of the reasons why I think I wrote in the beginning that I didn't feel you needed that very beginning paragraph, because you show it so much in various actions that she takes in the story, which really come through for me. I love the use that you had of the creatures of the rainforest to warn of danger, as well as his rescue by the monkey to kind of also play a double role in kind of like the trauma of how she wasn't thinking really in reality. And I thought that was very very effective. And how you introduce the woman who takes her in with the cow going across the street, I thought, and stopping. And I thought that was all very effective. I really liked too the tie into the animals in the nightmare at the end, and the use of the bigger children that somehow just stuck in our mind, kind of like the three witches of Macbeth, you know, to me anyway, when I was reading it, you know, kind of foreshadowing the dangers and showing her, and the whole thing showing her anxiety about the family again and the possibility of trouble ahead. I would have liked to have seen in that maybe her awakening from one of it as a start and really remembering it. But I thought that was a wonderful way to end the piece. Because of the use of your three different points of view, I kind of had a feeling, because I do this all the time, you know, welcome to the club, that the narrator was still making a decision on exactly how she would tell the story. Some of the transitions, in fact, where I was mostly stopped in the action of it was when these different points of views kind of came in and they took me out of the action or slowed the momentum of the story for me. And I think when you solve, like I have to in my pieces, when you solve the this decision about making what point of view you're going to write this from, I think a lot of that, the slowing of momentum and all that will go away. I thought two scenes could offer an opportunity to build more tension. One was a little bit more about the ideal tropical vacation that they were all on, or the setting of it and how calm it was before everything went, rammed in there. And you had first the alert of the animal, of the lizards, and then the tsunami. And then the other one was a little bit more about the Red Cross emergency site, which I kind of felt that if that was described in a more chaotic way, maybe even adding some sort of event in there somehow, that it would have provided me with a little bit more insight, because this was one of my questions when I read it, about why the Red Cross worker didn't offer to help a child, and why Alator, after she felt the ooh on her arm, decided to stay with the woman instead of going back to and just with her eyes glued to the message board, waiting for the next name to come up. But overall, the whole story has an incredible tension. And I really want to see how you develop this, how the narrator develops this, and what happens.
Thank you, Susan.
Yeah.
Who would like to go next?
I'll throw in my 2 cents,
All right, Mark.
and that's about what they're worth. I did a pretty deep dive in this at the census level, so I'm going to keep this more of an overview. My written critique was pretty involved. For me, the enthalpy of the piece is firmly embedded in the plot and the plight of the young protagonist. I mean, that's solid. And with this starting point of second draft will be a great opportunity to expand the tension and the interactions, as well as look at the sentence level word choices and word orders. I recommend you stick with a third person narrator so that you can freely give a beat by beat evocative images, descriptions, sensory flavors, to bring out things a child would miss or have problems processing or recognizing. That would be a benefit to the reader, I think. If you haven't seen the movie Impossible, I think if you did watch it, it'll give you some insight when describing actions and environment in a similar circumstances. I would try to avoid some of the reader feeder information in the middle and the girl's remembrances that take the reader away from the immediacy of the scene. You can put those during action interludes when she's not fighting to survive. Let that whole thing tumble like a cement mixer. Don't let us get away. A good place for what you heard underwater. When she's underwater, what did she hear? How did it feel being pushed around and struck by a degree? When you're underwater in a wave, you hear something. There's sound that you're very unfamiliar with. Overall, it's a good start. It will undoubtedly improve in subsequent rewrites. So carry on.
All right. Thank you. Awesome. You were under time. Who would like to go next? Rabia. Oh, yeah. Still muted, Rabia. Don't worry, we're never going to get it right, so.
I know.
Don't worry.
It seems like I always do the opposite. I think the narrator did a really good job creating tension and suspense, and I felt like I just wanted to read more, and I was always wondering what was going to happen, and the suspense about the lady who was helping her and not knowing if she's really going to help her or not. And I've seen some tsunami movies, but it seems like there's always a new angle. And because of the characters, you can extract lots of different stories from this type of tragedy. There was really good use of metaphor, description, some irony, and suspense. And the flow of the story was easy to read. And that's something that I like. So I didn't get caught up in details. The I was drawn into it right away with the hook and the setup. I would have liked more description about the character, especially the lady. I'm not sure. I don't remember that the narrator said what she looked like, or just I was wondering more about her, how old she was. Just more details. And with the girl, I was wondering why she wasn't more upset, because her emotionally, it just seemed like she was hopeful and just kind of going along with everything, but she wasn't really showing her emotions very much. So I would have liked to know more about what's either going on in her head or why she was able to be so unemotional. So I don't have a lot of other things to say about it because I really liked it and I'm interested in reading more.
Thanks, Rabia. Who would like to go next? Lizzie.
There's this line I just want to get to before I forget, like when she's kind of in this, tumult, which I thought was really, really well written. In the water, when she goes, she wondered if her dog could embody the monkey and come to save her as she had pleaded with him to do so. She knew that Adi might God of the sea, so she settled on that is true. And that really struck me. It just made me think of what our minds do, sometimes in trauma and traumatic situations, and how they just you just kind of go, it's like magical thinking. And I thought that was really well illustrated there for this girl, and it made me really connect with her. Just her inner thoughts, again, like it's really fun, I think, to have like a young girl as a protagonist, a young, and that always makes me happy to read, that and to have a young girl's voice. So that I really enjoyed throughout. And I think for me, I really don't know much about, the tsunami that, that happened in Thailand, if that's, where I thought that might be where, it was at. I don't know much, and I would have, for me, I think I would like to see, and again, it could, in other chapters, I know this was the first chapter, so I don't know what's going to be in the other chapters, but I think I'd really like to see more, more fleshing out of, of locals, fleshing out of, just so it's not like, just so like the people in the country that aren't in the background, I think is what I'm trying to say. Like I just want to know, more about, where this girl is at, since she's in a foreign country and in a, and in like a culture that's not her own. I think that I'd really like to see that too. But yeah, but thank you so much for this first chapter. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun to work on. Yeah.
Thanks, Lizzie. Who would like to go next? John.
Yeah, I enjoyed it also. It was the tension, I think, that you built in just starting out as one kind of disaster right after another, right up to the very end when she went to sleep and had a nightmare. I guess that was of sorts. It was I kind of related it to the perils of Pauline. It's like you're tied up on the railroad track and you're waiting for that train to hit. But kind of like everyone else had talked about, the POV, I kind of got lost in where I was. I think a third person POV would be very good for this. And I don't know how that would work, because it seems to me that letting her not understand what the people were saying would, just having them just sort of saying something that she did not understand at all in the background would be sort of like a mystery, that both she and the reader would have to go through and figure out. You know, like I've been in that situation where you're in a strange country, strange language. You have no idea what's going on. You're wandering around. You're kind of in a daze trying to figure out what's going on with where you're going, what's happening. There was one thing which was a time element, and that was I guess when the boy finds her and she's laying under the boat, and you say the fish are flopping, which means, you know, they probably the water is just receded from where she is, like minutes, not very long, and that doesn't seem very likely with them just going to market along that road, you know, where everything is just a huge disaster has occurred. Mainly that's it. I enjoyed it. It was a great story. You probably get far with that one. Thank you.
All right, good job. I like that. I agree with a lot of what you were saying. That's why my brain was like, who'd like to go next? You were under the wire too. Mike?
I do.
Oh,
Yeah.
Mike. And then after Mike, Signe.
Okay, I'll be really quick. Sharon, I didn't have a chance to read it. I got back in too late, but it sounds like it's very interesting. I'm going to read it tonight. Okay, that's what I'll apologize.
It's okay. My deal with the class is as long as you make up comments, it's okay if you missed it by the time of class. Signe.
Well, I just wanted to say that I really loved the protagonist in the story, how it's a young girl and she's a stranger in a strange land, and she has to kind of rely on her own, I think, you know, going forward, her own sort of self and her wits to get through. And it got me thinking a lot about stories and authors that I love that have young female characters. And I thought of Lydia Yuknavitch. I know, Jordan, you mentioned her earlier in the Book of Joan. And with this story, I was reminded of Lydia's book, The Small Backs of Children, where there's a young girl who's orphaned and it's a war-torn country, and she's got to find her way. So I was really enamored with the character, and that as it stands, as it is right now, just after reading this chapter, and I know that the chapter is only one of many chapters, just with this chapter, I was left feeling somewhat uncomfortable with how this white girl's story is, you know, given such precedence over, I'm assuming this is the 2004 tsunami that hit Southeast Asia and Thailand. And so for me, it was uncomfortable that her story is so much in the foreground, and the Thai people, the land, the Thai characters that the protagonist comes across they're nameless, they're not developed much. So I think the effect it had for me is that the suffering of the Thai people is either erased or just kind of serves as a background for this white girl's story. And that's not to say that this story is an important one to tell. I just, you know, kind of started thinking about, you know, how would a Thai person, if they were reading this, how would it make them feel? Are there ways to tell the story that, you know, as it is right now, and I haven't read the rest of it, you know, there seems to be kind of a demonizing of this, you know, Thai woman, this old woman who appears that she's going to be evil. You know, are there, I haven't read the rest of the story, so I can't answer these questions, but, you know, are there ways to tell the story that are more balanced and not quite so centered on this experience of this one little girl? So.
Thank you. Awesome. Diana, I think you're the last one.
Well, I was thinking back to the class we had on using danger to hook the reader. And I was thinking this is a perfect example because everything about the situation is dangerous. And it's kind of coming at her from all angles. And I felt very hooked into the story right from the beginning. And there were, I mentioned on what I wrote, that there were a couple of places where I noticed the point of view thing, and the beginning where you have a paragraph where she's 4 years old and then suddenly she's 11. I felt like I needed more of a transition or something to get me to 11 from 4. But I was, very taken in by the suspense of not knowing, is her family alive? Have they survived? Will she find them? How will they reconnect? And I also was very, nervous about the intentions of this woman who takes her in. There's a place where you have the line, something about, well, you'll do, or something like that. And it, it kind of almost gave me a chill because, it's kind of like, do for what? Like, what intention does she have in mind? And, I never felt that her intentions were good. So, I felt that the son of the fruit vendor who, saw her hand and actually probably saved her life. I felt that he was, a very relatable character, and I'm hoping that he comes back into the story later on in some way, that his concern for her and his skepticism about the woman, will somehow guide him to do, something that will help her. And I'm also hoping that the intelligence that she has is going to play out in, really interesting ways, that she, takes care of herself in what is a very, difficult and dangerous situation. And I tried to put myself in the head of a 12-year-old girl, and really the world seems sort of mysterious anyway at that age, and then to be in such a you know a situation where you've lost all the familiarity that makes life safe or comfortable. I think this is really going to be a great vehicle for telling a really good story. So I really enjoyed it, and look forward, hopefully someday, to reading more.
Thanks, Diana. Awesome. I guess that leaves me. So thanks so much, Sharon, for sharing this chapter. And I think, of course, everyone has said a lot that I feel as well. I just want to highlight the things that I agree with, so you kind of know, yeah, these are the things that really need work. But first, I want to just compliment you on just drawing a very invigorating and exciting scene. I mean, your scenes are full of color, full of sensory detail. I could see where I was. I felt caught up in the drama. So I just want to commend you on that. And the tension, as everyone else has pointed out. I mean, hers is such a good example of how, like, mortal peril. She's got several kinds of danger, right? There's the physical, immediate danger of death or harm. There's the emotional danger of losing your parents, and then being alone, and potentially being with people you don't know if you can trust them. So, and just being a child on your own in a country that is not your own is enough danger to keep anyone reading. So I really admired how you did that. And I like that age that she's at, because it's an age where kids can be just precocious enough to be pretty savvy and clever. As the mother of a nearly 13-year-old child, I know that 11-year-olds are quite sharp, and they are able to think more complexly than you would give them credit for. So I think that's a good age, and yet she's pre-adolescent, and so there's just a lot of potential in that age group that I really like.
for me, the biggest holdback or the thing that disrupted my flow was the point of view issue. And for me, what it comes down to is you're writing in the omniscient. And the omniscient is so tricky because what you have to do is let the reader know, yes, there is a godlike narrator who knows everything, but then you still have to be selective about how you filter the information. And there's a lot of points where I wanted the information filtered through the young girl's mind, but it feels like it's being told to me from a godlike narrator who knows everything, who's wiser than she is. And so there are points where I left specific comments like, here, I want you to stay inside her mind and her thoughts and her perspective. And then in other spaces, you can pull back and zoom out. Similarly, and I think John mentioned this, I also felt that it would be more effective to let us be in her experience as much as possible, and therefore not in the minds of these other characters, because they give away information that I think comes too soon or that steals the tension, particularly the woman who has thoughts. So I want to learn everything alongside her and know what she knows at the same time as she does, so that I'm surprised, because I actually wanted her to first see her as benevolent and then be surprised after she's decided to stay with her and give up on the search for her parents. And then I wanted her to have a more complicated, that would be when I would, as a reader, expect for the tables to turn. Then she's like, oh, okay, maybe this woman's plans for me are not as benign as I thought. And I think, I do think Signe makes some good points about really, there's maybe some research necessary to really flesh out this culture, these people, or consider, the other option. I don't know how married you are to the location. You could make up a tsunami anywhere. It doesn't have to be a real one, and you don't have to set it in Thailand. So that's just another thought if you want to get out of that whole dilemma. You're a fiction writer, you get to do whatever you want, essentially. So that's a thought too. Or it could be in, I don't know, just because it is an issue that's going to arise in, other readers and agents and publishers will have that issue. But that aside, I think you've done a really great job. For a first draft, I think you're in an excellent shape. And I think the kinds of revisions you have to do are just going to be tweaking that perspective at getting really clear on, I would say you can stay in the omniscient, which means you can still provide a little information that the protagonist doesn't know. But I would say in all the crucial moments, let us be inside her mind and let us stay with her versus inside the mind of other characters. It doesn't mean those characters can't speak and act. Stop it. But they can at least, I feel like if we're in her experience, then we are going to feel very up close and personal to whatever happens to her. So that's all I really want to say, but I think you did a great job and thank you for sharing it with us. So now you get to have your say.
The feedback was so incredibly valuable from each and every person. I was absolutely amazed. I copied all the remarks that everybody made and saved them so that I can go back and literally just address each item that you brought up, because there wasn't anything that anybody said that I didn't take very seriously and appreciate. So just briefly, I want to tell you a couple of things, and then I want to address a few questions that you had. This is about the tsunami in 2004 in Thailand. I did do a lot of research about personal stories. And so, and I do know from scientific research what exactly happened, how tall the waves were, how far inland the water went, how many waves there were, how many recessions there were, and things like that. So I actually did follow what happened there. And I, all the debris got caught in the buildings on the beach, all that stuff I think is very realistic. I also did quite a bit of research about Thai people, and that comes in the second chapter. Right now, she's just, going through a tsunami, and these are the immediate things that happen to her. But she will meet people. She will meet some very sympathetic characters in Thailand that will eventually help her. She will meet up with those beggar children and have an intense relationship with them. And so I think one mistake that I made, where a lot of people had questions, was why did the woman get so angry? and I pointed out that Alotar did pointing and had her palms up, and the woman's eyes bulged out. She got so angry. Well, these are cultural things. You're not supposed to touch heads, and she got really upset when she came in with her bare feet. Bare feet are a no-no. And so I will have to introduce those in a better way that helps the reader understand that those were cultural taboos that the girl did not understand at all and was having these major reactions from Thai people. I wanted to just say, Mark, all of your reviewing time, examining each word, and you certainly picked up on my wordiness, which I have a problem with, and overuse of the word that. And a lot of people said eliminate that first omniscient paragraph, and word flow, attention to detail. I really appreciated that. I'm going to use that a lot. Diana, appreciated all your appreciation of the tension in the story. And I explained to you the anger. That was a question that you had about the woman. John, you talked a lot about shifting the point of view. And I really see that now a lot when I look back. Everybody has said that. So I do get that. I'm going to look at it. I will try to integrate that omniscient first information in that omniscient first paragraph into the story in some way. And I just thought it was so funny, John, that you thought the monkey would never snap the branch and let the boat go. And of course the monkey wouldn't snap the branch, but that's what I imagine the monkey doing. And that's what she would imagine the monkey doing, because she is a magical 11-year-old. And girls, especially girls who are 11 years old, who are super smart, they love magical stuff. I know some of them. And so that is exactly what they would have imagined that the monkey did. So that made me laugh. The time element, I'll be more clear about that. I see the farmer as on his way to the fruit market when the tsunami comes, but it just goes up the hill like 1.5 miles, which is what it really did. And they were right on the edge. Their village was on the edge. And so he was going, and there was like a little mud in the street, but it wasn't, stopping him. He did not want that fruit to ripen. And so he kept going as much as he could go. And they really stopped just short of that town. So yeah. Anyway, Jordan, it was amazing, all the comments that you made, and between you and Mark, I didn't have to hire an editor for this first chapter, so thank you very much. Yeah. And the comments about authenticity of the characters' reactions. I really do need to work on that. I know that, but I also have to tell you that I know Finnish people quite well, and they're amazingly unemotional. They come to the United States and they have to take classes on small talk so that they learn how to chat with people. They get into elevators, they don't say a word. And so it's not that unusual, being that she's brought up that way, to not be that emotional, but most people wouldn't understand that. So I probably will bring some more emotion.
Plus, I wonder if, like a lot of people from cultures like that, they may have it on the inside, they just learn to suppress it on the outside. And I think that's what we need to see, is that the inside might be different than the outside. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I need to explain a little bit more why the Red Cross woman was a little bit unengaged the first day, because it'd be chaos there. And yeah, a chaos scene would be good. The second day, when she goes back, when Alatar goes back, the Red Cross lady really helps her and brings her through the bodies to look at them and things like that. And so, yeah, so I think a lot of your questions will be answered in the chapters to come, but there's so much I have to work with from all of your comments. I really, really appreciate it, because you read it so many times and you can't see anything. you know, you just can't see your own problems, the things that you need to work out. So I wish I had you all to read my other chapters. So thank you.
Coming back to class, Sharon.
Thank you very, very
Come
much.
again. Well, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Let's do our goals. And then next week is our last week. Rabia is our critique person. Yeah, so sometimes I have offered different options for the last class. Sometimes I can continue with the lesson as usual. We can do a Q&A style class where you bring questions and we kind of discuss them. Does anyone want to vote? So how many of you just want me to stick with the lesson style? Raise your hand. Ooh. And how many want Q&A? Oh, wait. How many of you want to stick with the lesson style?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then, oh, don't tell me we're split down the middle. And the rest of, how many of you want Q&A?
What is the lesson?
I think I was going to do sentence tension. So like, she's all, yeah, it depends. What are you going to talk about? Or is there something specific you guys are craving?
Point of view.
Point of view, I agree.
So it's, that's part of my character workshop. It takes weeks. I know that what I find is when I do it in an hour, it's too much information.
I think I'd like the sentence level stuff. Because that's the texture and the tendons.
Yeah.
In a paragraph.
Well, I'll tell you what, you guys think about it. Think about what you might want more of. I'm not trying to withhold point of view on you. It's just that my experience is that in an hour, it's too much information and people glaze over and it ends up being less helpful than not. That's why I've broken it into a longer class. So email me if there's something that you do want me. And so what I'll do is I'll think about what I get your answers, what you wanted me to talk about, and I'll decide and surprise you. So that's my best answer. All right, let's set our goals. Mark, what is your goal for next week?
Oh my goodness! You never called me first. You could call me, right?
I did call on you.
Okay. I wouldn't expect.
You need me to come back to you?
I shall have to describe that emotion. No, I'm going to continue building my wooden ships, which are very small, very intricate work, and I think that shaping of such intricate work helps my mind think intricately about writing. I'm going to work on chapter 2 and 3, maybe 4 of my current work in progress. I mean, I've got them fleshed out, but I need to go back. And I've done chapter 1, and John has approved it. So chapter 2, 3, maybe 4, I don't know.
All right, thank you. Diana.
I'm going to do a little more polishing on the essay, and then I just want to keep my routine going. I'm trying to build that habit of writing every morning, and I just have to keep building it. It's not quite set in stone yet.
Good. John.
Could I ask Sharon one question before we go? I'd just like to know, did the young girl, did she happen to land in with a tiger mom? I mean, is that why she is kind of acting the way she does?
Oh, you mean is this woman?
Yeah, the lady at the end.
Woman is very complex. She has a problem that this girl is going to help her solve, and she's laying aside maybe her ethical sense because her problem is so big to her. So I do, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Somewhat, and not really.
I hate to cut you guys off.
It sounds like a very complex thing to get into.
I have to wrap it up, you guys. I don't mean to be rude, but I actually have to run a little bit early tonight, so I'm cutting you off. But why don't you email each other? Okay.
Okay.
So John, what's your goal?
I'm going to work on putting some imagery into the writing I've got.
Awesome. Great. Lizzie.
Yeah, more reading.
Good.
It's what I can do right now. Yeah.
Good. Yes, do what you can do. Rabia.
Gonna work on the story again, the
Okay.
plot.
And Susan,
I'm just gonna keep writing.
great. Sharon,
I'm going to take all this great information and rework my first and probably second chapters.
great. Mike,
In a book I'm reading now, I'm gonna consciously find all the imagery that I can there and check it out. Never really thought much about it really till now.
I like that. Yeah, if you find any good images that you want to read to us next week, feel free.
Okay.
Signy,
I'm just gonna keep, we're working on the schedule and trying to figure out how to move forward and go through editing and.
Okay. All right, everyone, I will send out slides and recording later. And remember that Scene Stealer, which is my next class in July, is open for registration. Some of you have already signed up. Thank you. And I will see you next week. Bye.
Okay. See you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
For everybody.
Bye.
Bye.